My cracked screen lit up the freezing van I called home. A photo arrived from Maui, showing my stepfamily toasting cocktails at the Four Seasons, captioned with a cruel wish that I was successful like them. They were burning $90,000 of my grandfather's money on a vacation while I starved, but they missed one detail. Sitting behind them was my grandfather's best friend, the most ruthless lawyer on the West Coast. My name is Monica Hargrave, and for the last 88 days, my address has been a rusted Ford Econoline parked in the back row of a 24-hour Walmart. The windows are covered with Reflectix insulation I salvaged from a construction dumpster, but it does little to keep out the bone-chilling dampness of a Seattle winter. Inside, the air is stagnant, smelling faintly of mildew and the stale peanut butter that has become my primary source of protein. I curled my toes inside my sleeping bag, trying to generate friction, trying to remember what central heating felt like. It felt like a memory from a different lifetime, one where I wasn't a ghost haunting the fringes of a city I used to help audit. My alarm was the harsh glare of a security guard's flashlight sweeping across my windshield, a silent warning that I had overstayed my welcome. I sat up, my breath visible in the dim light, and checked my phone. It was 4 a.m. I had 3 hours before my shift started, which meant I had just enough time to drive to the 24-hour Planet Fitness 3 miles away for my daily shower. That $10 a month membership was the only thing separating me from total destitution. It was my bathroom, my dressing room, and the only place where I could stand under hot water until my skin turned red, washing away the grime of poverty. If only for 10 minutes. As I sat there, shivering in the driver's seat, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the rearview mirror. Dark circles bruised the skin under my eyes, and my cheekbones were sharper than they should have been. It was hard to believe that less than 6 months ago, I was a senior auditor at Vanguard Audit. I had a corner office, a salary in the 6 figures, and a reputation for spotting financial discrepancies that others missed. I was the woman companies called when the numbers didn't add up. Now, I was the discrepancy. I had lost it all. The job, the apartment, the respect. Thanks to a whisper campaign so vicious and calculated, it could only have been orchestrated by one person. My stepmother, Brenda. She had planted the seeds of doubt at my firm. Anonymous calls about gambling debts and embezzlement. Then came the actual debts. Credit cards opened in my name by a father who couldn't say no to his wife's lavish demands. By the time I unraveled the fraud, I had been fired as a liability. My father, Robert, had looked at the floor while I packed my desk, mumbling that he was sorry, that Brenda was just trying to protect the family image. The phone in my lap buzzed, jarring me from my misery. I looked down. It was a notification from Instagram, followed immediately by a direct text message. The sender was Tiffany, my stepsister. I shouldn't have opened it. I knew better. But masochism is a hard habit to break when you are lonely. The image that loaded on my cracked screen was an assault of color. It was a selfie taken at sunset. The sky was a bleeding mix of violet and orange, framing the manicured palm trees of the Four Seasons Maui. In the foreground, 3 faces beamed with terrifying whiteness. Brenda, wearing a sun hat that probably cost more than my van. My father, looking tanned and purposefully oblivious. And Tiffany, holding up a turquoise cocktail with an orchid floating in it. The caption under the photo was pure Tiffany, healing vibes only, so grateful for family time. But the direct text she sent along with it was far more honest. It read, "Wish you were like us, capable of enjoying life and being successful. Stop bothering us with your sob stories. We deserve this peace." I let out a dry, hacking laugh that hurt my chest. Success, that was what they called it. I stared at the photo, dissecting it with the eyes of the auditor I used to be. The suite they were staying in, visible in the background, was the presidential villa. I knew the rates. That was easily $10,000 a night. The vintage champagne on the table, the designer swimwear. How, I asked myself. My father's hardware business had been in the red for 3 years. Brenda hadn't worked a day in her life. Then, another notification pinged. This one wasn't social media. It was an email alert. Years ago, when I was still the dutiful daughter managing my father's chaotic finances. I had set up automatic forwarding for any transaction over $5,000 to come to my personal email. He was so technologically illiterate, he had never figured out how to turn it off. And I had been too distracted by my own survival to unsubscribe. Subject: Transaction alert. Hargrave Emergency Medical Fund. My blood ran cold. That fund was sacred. It was established by my grandfather. Silas Vane, solely for life or death medical situations. It was the safety net for the entire family, intended for cancer treatments or emergency surgeries. I opened the email. Merchant, Four Seasons Resort. Maui at Wailea. Amount, $92,450. Description: Family Psychological Therapy, Workshop and Trauma Recovery Retreat. I stared at the glowing numbers until they blurred. They weren't in Hawaii for a vacation. No, on paper. They were there for therapy. They had classified a luxury getaway as a medical necessity. And the sickest part? I knew exactly what narrative they used to justify it to the trustees. They were claiming they needed to recover from the trauma of dealing with me. The addict, the thief, the disappointment. Those were the labels Brenda had pinned to my chest 5 years ago to sever the bond between me and my grandfather. Silas Vane was a titan of West Coast real estate. A man who built skyscrapers out of sheer will. I was his favorite. I was the one who inherited his head for numbers, his intolerance for nonsense. But after his first stroke, Brenda blocked my access. She intercepted my calls. She fed him falsified police reports and fake rehab invoices. She told him I had stolen his antique watch to buy heroin. I closed my eyes, remembering the last time I saw him. He was sitting in his wheelchair by the window, refusing to look at me, his voice trembling with a rage that broke my heart. "Get out, Monica, and don't come back until you are clean. Not a penny. You get not a penny until you are the girl I raised again." I wasn't an addict. I had never touched a drug in my life. I was just a girl who lost her mother too young and got a predator for a stepmother. I tried to call Mrs. Higgins, his longtime secretary. For the 100th time this month, I pressed the speed dial. One ring, then a sharp click. "The number you have dialed has restricted your access." Blocked. Brenda had gotten to her too. Or perhaps she had just replaced the staff with her own cronies. I looked back at the photo of them in paradise. $90,000. That money could have cleared my name. It could have started a business. It could have saved me. Instead, it was buying Mai Tais for the people who ruined me. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat. I couldn't look at it anymore. I had to get to work. I twisted the key in the ignition. My heart stopped. I tried again. Silence. "No," I whispered, panic rising in my throat like bile. "No, please, not today." I pounded the steering wheel with my fist, screaming a silent curse at the universe. The battery was dead. The cold had killed it. I checked the time. If I didn't leave now, I would be late. And if I was late, I would be fired. And if I was fired, I wouldn't be able to afford the gas to run the heater, assuming the car ever started again. I had no choice. I grabbed my backpack and opened the door. The wind hit me like a physical blow, carrying stinging pellets of sleet. It was a 5-mile walk to the Omnicorp Tower where I worked as a contract cleaner. I pulled my hood up, shoving my hands into my thin pockets. My boots, purchased secondhand from a thrift store, had a split in the left sole. Within 2 blocks, I could feel the icy slush seeping into my sock, numbing my toes. I walked past the warm, golden windows of coffee shops, where people were buying lattes that cost more than my daily food budget. I walked past business people rushing to their offices, clutching briefcases, complaining about the weather. They didn't see me. To them, I was just part of the urban landscape, a gray smudge against the gray concrete. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and angry, mixing with the melting snow on my cheeks. My family was watching the sunset in Hawaii, laughing about how pathetic I was, while I marched through the freezing slush to scrub toilets for minimum wage. Just a lowly secretary. That's what they told people I had become. If only they knew. I wasn't even a secretary. I was the person who emptied the secretary's trash can. But as I trudged toward the looming steel and glass structure of the Omnicorp building, fighting the numbness in my feet, I held on to one thought. In that photo, in the blurry background behind my gloating stepmother, I had seen something, or rather, someone, a figure reading a newspaper. It was improbable. It was impossible. But if it was, who I thought it was, the $90,000 they just stole might be the most expensive mistake they ever made. The elevator to the 40th floor of the Omnicorp building moved with a silence that felt oppressive. My ears popped as the numbers climbed, leaving the gritty reality of the street level far below. I leaned against the mirrored wall of the cab, clutching my mop handle like a walking stick. My legs were trembling uncontrollably from the 5-mile hike through the slush, and the sensation in my left foot had gone from a sharp, freezing sting to a dull, alarming numbness. When the doors slid open, the air changed. It was climate-controlled, scented with white tea and cedar, a stark contrast to the mildewed atmosphere of my van. I dragged my yellow cleaning cart across the plush carpet, the wheels squeaking in a rhythm that sounded like a scream in the quiet hallway. My assignment was the executive boardroom, a glass-walled aquarium at the corner of the building that offered a panoramic view of the sleeping city. I swiped my keycard, expecting the usual emptiness of a corporate graveyard at 3 a.m. I pushed the heavy glass door open and began to maneuver the cart inside. Keeping my head down, my plan was simple. Mop the floors, wipe the mahogany table, empty the shredders, and maybe, if I was fast enough, curl up under the conference table for 10 minutes of stolen sleep before the sun came up. I squeezed the excess water from the mop into the bucket, the gray water swirling like my thoughts. As I stepped forward to begin, a movement in the far corner of the room stopped my heart. A man was sitting in one of the high-backed leather chairs facing the window. The room was dark, lit only by the ambient glow of the city skyline. Casting his profile in silhouette, he was motionless, a statue in a charcoal suit, staring out at the rain-lashed glass. I froze, gripping the mop handle. I was not supposed to be here when executives were present. I was the invisible workforce, the ghosts who reset the stage for the masters of the universe. "I apologize, sir," I rasped, my voice cracking from disuse and dehydration. "I didn't know the room was occupied. I will come back later." I turned to leave, desperate to avoid a complaint that could cost me this job, but his voice stopped me. It was deep, gravelly, and carried an authority that didn't need volume to be heard. "Stay," he said. He didn't turn around. "The insomnia is a curse, but the view is a blessing. Do not let me interrupt your work." I hesitated. My instructions were strict. Never disturb the VIPs, but his command was absolute. I nodded to his back and dipped the mop onto the floor. The smell of industrial lavender cleaner filled the air, masking the scent of my own damp, thrift store clothes. I worked in silence for 10 minutes, my movements mechanical. The rhythm of mopping usually soothed me, but tonight, my body was failing. The hunger I had been suppressing for 2 days suddenly roared to life, a hollow cramp that doubled me over. Black spots danced in my vision. The room tilted. I reached out to steady myself on the edge of the massive conference table, but my wet hand slipped on the polished wood. My knees buckled. I crashed to the floor, knocking over the bucket. The sound was thunderous. Gallons of gray, soapy water flooded across the expensive carpet, soaking my jeans instantly. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," I gasped, scrambling to my knees, trying frantically to soak up the water with my bare hands, ignoring the humiliation burning my cheeks. Footsteps approached, heavy, deliberate steps. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the shouting, waiting for the inevitable, "You're fired." Instead, silence. I opened my eyes. A pair of polished, hand-stitched Italian leather Oxfords stood inches from my face. My gaze traveled up the pressed trousers to a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. The man was old, perhaps in his late 70s, with silver hair and deep lines etched around a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled. He wasn't looking at the mess. He was looking at my hands. My knuckles were red and cracked from the cold, the skin raw from cheap chemicals. Then his gaze shifted to my feet. The sole of my left boot had flapped open, revealing the wet, mismatched wool sock underneath. He crouched down. It was a movement of surprising agility for a man of his age. He was now at eye level with me. "Look at me," he commanded. I forced myself to meet his gaze. His eyes were a piercing, steel gray, intelligent and uncomfortably sharp. He studied my face as if he were reading a legal brief, searching for inconsistencies. A flicker of recognition passed through his eyes, followed by a profound confusion. "You have Eleanor's eyes," he murmured, almost to himself. "The same shape, the same defiance." My breath hitched. No one had mentioned my mother's name in years, not since she died, not since Brenda took over. "Who are you?" he asked, the softness in his voice evaporating, replaced by a judicial sternness. I swallowed hard, trying to stop my teeth from chattering. "Monica," I whispered. "Monica Hargrave." The reaction was instantaneous. The old man recoiled as if I had slapped him. The pity in his face vanished, replaced by a cold, hard mask of suspicion. He stood up slowly, towering over me once again. "Hargrave," he repeated, the name tasting like poison in his mouth. "Silas's granddaughter." "Yes," I said, wringing the dirty rag in my hands. "Do you know my grandfather?" He didn't answer. Instead, he walked back to the window, his back stiff. "I know him, and I know of you, but I'm confused, Miss Hargrave. My information must be outdated." He turned back to face me, his silhouette framed by the city lights. "I was under the impression that you were currently a resident of Serenity Hills in Malibu, a premier rehabilitation facility." I blinked, the water on the floor soaking into my knees. "What?" "Serenity Hills," he enunciated clearly. "The trustees of the Vane Family Trust approve a check for $15,000 every month for your treatment there. $15,000 for a private suite, equine therapy, and holistic addiction recovery." The room spun again, but this time not from hunger. $15,000 a month, while I slept in a freezing van and ate expired canned food, while I showered at a gym, while I taped my shoes together. My voice failed me. "I'm not in rehab. I've never been to Malibu." He raised an eyebrow, his expression skeptical. "And yet, the reports say you are a severe narcotic addict who requires isolation. They say you are dangerous, unstable." He gestured to my disheveled appearance. "Although, looking at you now, the addict part seems plausible enough." "I am not an addict." The scream tore from my throat before I could stop it. I stood up, swaying on my feet. "I have never touched drugs in my life. I am starving. I am freezing. I am working 2 jobs to buy gas for my car because my stepmother kicked me out on the street with nothing but the clothes on my back." The old man watched my outburst without flinching. He was assessing me, weighing my desperation against the narrative he had been fed. He was a man of evidence, and right now, the evidence before him, my emaciated frame, my clear but terrified eyes, the genuine shock at the mention of the money, was contradicting the paperwork. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek black smartphone. He dialed a number, holding up a hand to silence me. "It is Thorne," he said into the phone. "Wake up. I need a verification run immediately. Run a background check on the night cleaning staff at Omnicorp. Specifically, a Monica Hargrave. I want to know where her paycheck is deposited. I want to know her credit score. I want to know if she has a criminal record for possession. You have 10 minutes. He hung up and looked at me. "If you are lying to me, child, I will have you arrested for trespassing before you can blink. But if you are telling the truth..." His voice trailed off, his eyes darkening with a terrifying intensity. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a $100 bill and a heavy cream-colored business card. He placed them on the dry end of the conference table. "Leave the mess," he ordered. Take this money, go across the street to the diner, eat a steak, eat two, and then go buy yourself a pair of shoes that doesn't leak. I stared at the money. It was more than I made in 3 shifts. Come to this address on the card tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Do not be late. And Miss Hargrave? I looked up at him, tears finally spilling over. Bring your anger, he said. If what you say is true, you are going to need it. The brass plaque on the heavy oak door read Thorne and Associates, located 10 floors below the executive suite where I had been scrubbing toilets the night before. I smoothed the front of my thrift store jeans, conscious of the new, sturdy work boots on my feet, purchased with the money Elias had given me. They were the first comfortable thing I had worn in months, but they felt heavy, grounding me as I stepped into a world I had been exiled from. The receptionist didn't ask for my name. She simply pressed a button, and the double doors buzzed open. Elias Thorne was waiting. The room was more of a library than an office, lined with floor-to-ceiling law books that smelled of old paper and authority. He sat behind a desk large enough to land a plane on, the surface covered in neat, terrifying stacks of manila folders. Sit, he said, not looking up from a document he was scrutinizing with a magnifying glass. I sat. The leather chair swallowed me whole. I have spent the last 6 hours reconstructing the last 2 years of your grandfather's life, Elias began, finally looking at me. His eyes were red-rimmed. He hadn't slept. And in doing so, I have uncovered a masterpiece of fiction. He slid a file across the desk. It was thick, bound with a red rubber band. 2 years ago, Silas suffered a minor ischemic stroke, Elias said, his voice level but tight. It was mild, reversible, but it affected his speech temporarily and his mobility. That was the opening they needed. My hands shook as I touched the file. I didn't know. They told me he was traveling. Then they told me he refused to see me. They lied, Elias stated flatly. They used his condition to invoke a dormant clause in his medical power of attorney. Your father, Robert, signed it, but your stepmother, Brenda, executes it. He pointed to the first document. It was a medical report on letterhead from a doctor. Aris Thorne. No relation to Elias. Likely a coincidence or a pseudonym. Read the diagnosis, Elias commanded. I read the highlighted paragraph. The words swam before my eyes. A grotesque caricature of a person I didn't know. Patient Monica Hargrave exhibits signs of severe paranoid schizophrenia induced by chronic opioid and methamphetamine abuse. Violent tendencies. History of theft from family members. Recommendation. Immediate and total isolation from the elderly vulnerable relative. Silas Vane. Methamphetamine? I whispered, the air leaving my lungs. I was an auditor. I was working 60-hour weeks finding tax loopholes for tech startups. I wasn't on meth. Keep reading, Elias said. Follow the money. He flipped the page to a financial ledger. It was a printout from the Vane Family Trust. Here, Elias tapped a line item. Monthly disbursement to Serenity Hills Rehabilitation Center in Malibu, $15,000. I've never been there, I said, my voice rising. I've been sleeping in a van in a Walmart parking lot. I know, Elias said. I had my investigator run the corporate registration for Serenity Hills this morning. It is not a medical facility. It is a shell company registered in Nevada. The sole signatory is a man named Marcus Vance. That's Brenda's brother, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Her younger brother, he's a failed DJ in Las Vegas. Precisely. Elias nodded. They are funneling $15,000 a month of Silas's money into her brother's pocket, claiming it is for your treatment. But that is just the appetizer. He flipped to another page. This one was dated 3 days ago. Debit, $92,450. Payee, Four Seasons, Resort Maui. We know about this, I said, bitter bile rising in my throat. The vacation. Look at the classification code, Elias urged. I squinted at the fine print. Expense category, medical/therapeutic. Description, family trauma recovery workshop, and grief counseling for victims of domestic addiction violence. The room went silent. The hum of the air conditioner sounded like a roar. They are charging their vacation to the trust, I said slowly, piecing together the auditing trail in my head, the part of my brain that hadn't atrophied from poverty. They are claiming that my addiction has caused them so much trauma that they require a $90,000 therapy retreat in Hawaii. And because it is classified as medical, it is tax-exempt and bypasses the discretionary spending limits on their personal allowances. Correct, Elias leaned back, steepling his fingers. They are not just stealing. They are using your reputation as the getaway car. They destroyed your career, your credit, and your relationship with your grandfather to create a line item in a budget that allows them to loot the estate. I felt sick. It wasn't just greed. It was malice. They had systematically dismantled my life not just to get rid of me, but to use my corpse as a stepping stone to luxury. I need to prove it, I said. Standing up, I reached for my backpack and dumped it onto his pristine desk. Out fell my meager possessions. A stack of wrinkled pay stubs from Vanguard Audit, a laminate Employee of the Month certificate from 6 months ago, and my bank statements showing a balance of $12.40. Does this look like the life of a high-functioning meth addict? I asked, spreading the papers out. Addicts don't keep their student loan payments current until the day they are fired. Addicts don't have perfect attendance records. Elias looked at the papers, but he didn't pick them up. This is circumstantial. Monica, in a court of law, Brenda will claim you were hiding it well. She will claim these bank statements are just one account and that you have hidden cash elsewhere. He pressed a button on his intercom. Send the nurse in. We deal in absolutes, Elias said to me. If we are going to walk into the lion's den, I need you to be bulletproof. The side door opened, and a woman in blue scrubs entered carrying a medical case. Hair and blood, Elias ordered. Full toxicology panel, I want the 10-panel screen, and I want the hair follicle test that goes back 90 days. I want to know if she has taken so much as a Tylenol in the last 3 months. I sat on the edge of the sofa, rolling up my sleeve without hesitation. The needle prick was sharp, a tiny sting compared to the agony of the last year. Then the nurse snipped a lock of hair from the back of my head near the root. How long? I asked. For you? I put a rush on it, Elias said. The lab is downstairs. We wait. The next 2 hours were the longest of my life. Elias worked silently on other cases, while I paced the room, staring at the spine of every law book, replaying the last conversation I had with my father. I'm sorry. Monica. Brenda says it's for the best. He had known. He had signed the checks. He was financing his suntan with my destruction. Finally, the phone on Elias's desk rang. He put it on speaker. Thorne here. We have the results for Hargrave. Monica, a clinical voice replied. Read them. Blood panel is clean, no alcohol, no amphetamines, no opiates, no benzodiazepines. Electrolyte levels indicate mild malnutrition and dehydration, but zero toxicity. And the hair? Elias asked, his eyes locking onto mine. Clean, the voice confirmed. Sample history goes back approximately 6 months based on length. No trace of illicit substances. No trace of prescription narcotics. Nothing. The subject is chemically boring. Mr. Thorne? Thank you. Send the official courier copy to my office immediately. Elias hung up. The silence returned. But the tension had shifted. It was no longer the tension of uncertainty. It was the tension of a gathering storm. Elias stood up slowly. He picked up the fake medical report Brenda had filed, the one calling me a violent schizoaffective addict, and then he picked up the fresh lab report that proved I was stone-cold sober. He looked at the 2 documents, his face darkening with a rage that was terrifying to witness. It wasn't the hot, explosive anger of a young man. It was the cold, volcanic wrath of a man who had spent 50 years upholding the law. They didn't just steal money, Elias said, his voice low and dangerous. Money can be repaid. Property can be returned. He looked at me. his eyes softening for the first time with genuine sorrow. They stole your name, Monica. They painted you as a monster to justify their greed. They didn't just commit fraud. They committed a murder of character. They killed who you were so they could buy handbags and cocktails. He slammed the file shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Get your coat," Elias said. "We are going to see Silas, and God help anyone who tries to stop us." The iron gates of the Vane estate loomed over the hood of Elias's town car, black and imposing against the gray morning sky. I had not seen these gates in 5 years. When I was a child, they were always open, welcoming me home from school. Now, they were shut tight, reinforced with new security cameras that swiveled to track our arrival. The guard in the booth was new. He stepped out, hand resting on his holster, a look of bored aggression on his face. He didn't recognize me. To him, I was just a stranger in the passenger seat. "Private property?" the guard barked. "Turn around." Elias didn't even roll down the window fully. He simply pressed a button on his dashboard, and the heavy iron gates groaned, their electronic locks disengaging with a loud clank. The guard looked stunned, tapping his earpiece frantically. "I have override codes older than you, son," Elias muttered as we glided past the confused security team and up the winding driveway. The mansion itself looked like a mausoleum. The curtains were drawn tight on every window, blocking out the daylight, the flower beds. Once my grandmother's pride and joy were manicured to a sterile perfection that felt devoid of life. We parked at the foot of the grand staircase, my heart hammered against my ribs. I felt like an intruder in the only place that had ever truly felt like home. "He is inside," Elias said, his voice soft but firm. "Prepare yourself, Monica. The man you remember is there, but he is buried under layers of poison they have fed him." We entered through the front door using Elias's key. The foyer was silent, the air heavy with the smell of antiseptic and expensive potpourri. It didn't smell like a home. It smelled like a high-end hospice. Almost immediately, a woman in a crisp white nurse's uniform materialized from the hallway. She wasn't one of the kind. Elderly nurses I remembered from my childhood. She was young, severe, and looked more like a prison warden than a caregiver. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Mistress, Hargrave left strict instructions. Mr. Vane is having a bad day. He is confused and agitated. No visitors." "I am not a visitor, Nurse Ratchet," Elias said, brushing past her. "I am the executor of this estate, and I am going to see my client." "You cannot take her in there," she hissed, pointing a manicured finger at me. "That is the addict. She will upset him. I will have to call security." "Call them," Elias challenged without stopping. "And while you are at it, call a moving van. You might need it." We walked down the long corridor to the sunroom, the place where my grandfather used to drink his morning coffee and read the Financial Times. He was there. Silas Vane sat in a motorized wheelchair facing the fireplace, a blanket draped over his legs. He looked smaller than I remembered. The broad shoulders that had carried a real estate empire seemed to have collapsed inward. His silver hair was thin, and his hands, resting on the armrests, trembled slightly. "Silas," Elias said gently. My grandfather turned his head slowly. For a moment, his eyes were clouded, unfocused. Then, they landed on me. The transformation was instant and terrifying. The frailty vanished, replaced by a sudden, surging energy of pure rage. He gripped the armrests, his knuckles turning white. "You," he spat. The voice was raspy, but the venom was clear. "How dare you? How dare you come into this house?" "Grandpa," I whispered, stepping forward, my hands instinctively reaching out. "Don't you touch me!" he roared, the sound echoing off the high ceilings. "Get out! Isn't $15,000 a month enough for you? Did you spend it all on your filth? Did you come here to steal the silver again?" I froze, the accusation cutting deeper than the cold outside. He truly believed it. He looked at me with such disgust, such profound disappointment. that I wanted to dissolve into the floor. "Silas, stop," Elias commanded. He didn't shout, but his voice cracked through the room like a whip. He walked over to the wheelchair and knelt down, forcing my grandfather to look at him. "Look at her. Silas, really look at her." "I see a thief," Silas muttered, his chest heaving. "I see the girl who broke my heart." "You see a ghost story invented by Brenda," Elias corrected him. He slammed the thick medical file onto the small table beside the wheelchair. "You are a man of data, Silas. You always were. So look at the data." Silas stared at the folder, breathing hard. "Open it," Elias urged. With shaking hands, my grandfather flipped the cover. He stared at the toxicology report. He read the lines that Elias pointed out, the lines that declared me 100% clean, with zero history of drug use. He read the date stamp, 2 hours ago. This could be faked," Silas whispered, his voice wavering. "Brenda showed me reports. She showed me police records." "Brenda showed you Photoshop," Elias said. Then he pulled out the second set of documents. These were the photographs his private investigator had taken the night before. He laid them out on the table one by one. Photo 1. Me sleeping in the front seat of the rusted van, curled up in a ball for warmth. Photo 2. Me washing my face in the bathroom of a Planet Fitness. Photo 3. Me scrubbing the floor of the Omnicorp building, wearing a uniform that was 2 sizes too big. "Does this look like the life of a princess spending $15,000 a month on rehab?" Elias asked softly. "Does this look like a girl who is partying in Malibu? She has been homeless for 3 months. Silas, she has been starving 3 miles from your gate while you paid for Brenda's facials." Silas picked up the photo of the van. He brought it close to his face, his eyes narrowing. He looked from the photo to me, taking in my cheap boots, my worn jacket, the hollowness of my cheeks that I couldn't hide. "Monica?" he asked, his voice breaking. It was the first time he had said my name without hate. I walked closer, dropping to my knees beside his chair so I was lower than him. I didn't care about the nurse watching from the doorway. "I didn't steal your watch, Grandpa," I said, my voice thick with tears I refused to let fall. "I didn't steal anything. Brenda kicked me out the day after Dad signed the power of attorney. She told me that if I ever tried to contact you, or if I ever came near the house, she would have me arrested. She said she had evidence that I was dealing drugs, and that she would make sure I went to prison for 10 years. I took a breath, holding his gaze. "I was afraid. I thought you hated me. I thought you believed them. So I stayed away to protect you. I thought you wanted me gone." Silas looked at Elias, then back at me. The anger that had sustained him for 5 years, the righteous indignation of a patriarch betrayed, began to crumble. In its place came something far more painful. It was the crushing weight of realization. He looked down at his own hands, hands that had built skyscrapers, hands that had signed the checks that funded his own deception. He realized he had been a prisoner. He had been isolated, fed lies, and manipulated into financing the destruction of the only person who actually loved him. A single tear leaked from his eye, tracking through the deep lines of his face. He reached out a trembling hand and touched my cheek. His fingers were cold. "They told me," he rasped, his voice barely audible. "They told me you laughed when I had my stroke. They told me you said, 'Finally, the old man is dying.' I was in the hospital waiting room for 3 days. I told him. Security wouldn't let me up. They said you gave the order." Silas closed his eyes. He let out a long, shuddering breath. For a moment, I thought he might have another stroke. The silence in the room was absolute. But when he opened his eyes again, the moisture was gone. The sorrow was gone. Silas Vane did not get sad. He got even. His posture shifted. He sat up straighter in his chair. The trembling in his hands stopped. The fog of age and medication seemed to burn away under the heat of a cold. Calculated fury. He looked past me, past Elias, to the nurse standing in the doorway. "You?" Silas said. His voice was no longer weak. It was the voice of the chairman of the board. The nurse jumped. "Mr. Vane, You are upsetting yourself. Get out, Silas said. Sir, Mrs. Hargrave said. I do not care what that woman said, Silas interrupted, his tone deadly calm. You are fired. You and every other spy wearing a white uniform in this house. You have 10 minutes to pack your bags and leave my property. If you are still here in 11 minutes, Mr. Thorne will have you arrested for elder abuse and conspiracy to commit fraud. The nurse paled, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She looked at Elias, who merely checked his watch. 9 minutes remaining, Elias noted dryly. The nurse turned and ran. Silas looked down at me. He didn't hug me. He didn't weep. He placed his hand on my shoulder, his grip firm and steady. It was a transfer of power. It was a promise. Elias, Silas said, not looking away from me. Secure the house, change the codes, cut the phone lines, and get me the ledger. Already done, old friend, Elias replied. Good, Silas said. A dark shadow passed over his face, a look of terrifying resolve. They wanted a vegetable. They're about to get a butcher. The war room was not a bunker, but the mahogany-lined library of the Vane estate. Outside, the rain lashed against the windows, but inside, the atmosphere was dry, cold, and electric with the hum of servers and the scratching of pens. On the large monitor mounted on the wall, Tiffany's Instagram feed was refreshing in real time. It was a grotesque parade of excess. The latest photo showed her and Brenda at a spa, their faces covered in gold leaf masks. The caption read, Invest in yourself because you are your own biggest asset. #self-love, #legacy. My grandfather, Silas, stared at the screen, his face a mask of revulsion. His hand hovered over the phone on his desk. I want them stranded, Silas growled, his voice regaining the gravelly timbre that used to terrify boardrooms. I want to cancel the cards right now. I want the hotel to evict them. I want them to sleep on the beach until they have to beg for a flight home. Too fast, Elias said, not looking up from his laptop. If you cut the cards now, they will know they have been discovered. They will panic. They will lawyer up, hide the assets they have already siphoned off, and play the victim card. They will claim it is a banking error. I stepped forward, tapping the screen where Brenda's smiling face mocked us. Elias is right. Grandfather, you don't pull the fishing line when the fish just nibbles. You wait until they swallow the hook whole. I walked over to the table where we had spread out the financial records I had spent the last 24 hours analyzing. My auditor's brain was fully engaged, overriding the exhaustion and the lingering hunger. I pointed to a document I had unearthed from the digital archives of the Vane Trust. They aren't just spending cash, I explained, my finger tracing the transaction path. Brenda is getting greedy. She knows the $15,000 a month isn't enough to sustain the lifestyle she wants. She is making a move on the capital assets. Silas leaned in, his eyes narrowing. Which one? The Vane Commercial Complex in downtown Seattle, I said. It is your crown jewel. It is worth $40 million. She can't sell that, Silas snapped. It is in the primary trust. She is trying to, I countered. I found a draft contract of sale prepared by her brother's shell company. She is using the medical power of attorney to claim that you are incapacitated and that the sale is necessary to fund your end-of-life care. She is planning to sell it for $20 million, half its value, to a buyer in the Cayman Islands. I suspect she is the buyer. The silence in the room was heavy. This wasn't just theft. It was a corporate dismantling. If we stop them now, I continued, we stop the sale, but we might miss the paper trail that proves criminal intent. We need her to come back here believing she has won. We need her to walk into this house ready to sign that deed. Silas sat back, the anger in his eyes cooling into a sharp, diamond-hard resolve. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in years as a peer, not just a granddaughter. You sound like me, he murmured, before I got soft. He turned to Elias. What do you need? I need Monica to disappear, Elias said. The girl who sleeps in a van needs to vanish. When Brenda walks through those doors, She needs to face a wall of steel, not a victim. Silas opened the drawer of his desk and pulled out a black American Express Centurion card. He slid it across the mahogany surface. "Get her an apartment," Silas ordered. "The penthouse at the Meridian. It is empty, and get her whatever she needs to look like a vein." I looked at the heavy metal card. A week ago, I would have used it to buy a sandwich. Now, it was a weapon. "I don't want the penthouse," I said, pushing the card back slightly. "And I don't want a shopping spree. I'm not doing this to play dress-up. I need a secure location with high-speed internet and a printer. A hotel suite is fine, and for clothes, I need a uniform." "A uniform?" Elias asked, amused. "Armor," I corrected. "I need a tailored suit. I need a haircut that says I will fire you without blinking. I need to look like the director of internal audit, not a runway model." Silas smiled, a thin, predatory expression. "Do it." For the next 2 days, I lived a double life. By night, I slept in a suite at the Fairmont, eating lean protein and vegetables to restore the color to my skin, sleeping 8 hours to erase the dark circles. By day, I worked with Elias and a team of forensic accountants he had sworn to secrecy. We built a file on Brenda and Robert that was 500 pages thick. I went to a salon and told them to cut off my long, matted hair. I wanted a sharp, angular bob. Severe, professional. When I looked in the mirror, the scared girl from the parking lot was gone. In her place was a woman who looked like she could cut glass with her jawline. I bought one suit, navy blue, Italian wool, tailored to within an inch of its life, and a pair of stilettos that clicked on the floor like the hammer of a gun. On the 3rd day, we were ready. The family was still in Hawaii, scheduled to return in 4 days. We couldn't wait that long. The contract for the building sale was pending signature on Monday. "It is time to reel them in," Elias said. We had regained control of Silas's primary email and the phone of his personal secretary, Mrs. Higgins, whom we had brought back into the fold after learning Brenda had fired her. I sat at the computer, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I was logged into the secretary's official account. "Write it," Silas commanded from his wheelchair. "Make them greedy." I typed the message. "Urgent. Subject: Immediate family meeting required. From Office of Silas Vane. Dear Mrs. Hargrave. Mr. Vane's condition has deteriorated rapidly. His cardiologists have scheduled emergency high-risk surgery for Tuesday morning. The prognosis is uncertain. Mr. Vane has expressed a moment of lucidity and wishes to finalize the handover of all executive powers and estate management to you and Robert before the procedure to ensure the assets are protected. He is asking for you to return immediately to sign the final transfer documents. Please advise flight details so the driver can meet you." I hit send. We waited, the 3 of us, the patriarch, the lawyer, and the auditor, sat in silence, watching the inbox. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Then, the reply came. From Brenda Hargrave. "OMG. We are packing now. Book the first flight out tomorrow morning. Tell Dad to hold on. We are coming to take care of everything. Love, Brenda." "Love, Brenda," Silas read aloud, his voice dripping with acid. "She thinks I am dying, and she is rushing home to pick the carcass clean." "She thinks she is coming to a coronation," I said, standing up and smoothing the lapel of my new blazer. Elias closed his laptop with a snap. "Let's make sure the reception is memorable." "The flight lands at 11 tomorrow," I said, checking the flight number she had attached. "They will come straight here. They won't even drop off their luggage." "Good," Silas said. "Set the stage. I want the boardroom ready. I want the projector set up. And Monica?" "Yes, grandfather?" "When they walk in," he said, "I want you to be the one who turns on the lights." I looked at the photo of my family in Hawaii one last time. The photo where they wished I was like them. "Don't worry," I whispered to the screen. "I am going to be exactly what you wished for. I am going to be successful, and I am going to be the last thing you ever see as rich people." The Gulfstream G650 touched down at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, under a blanket of gray drizzle. But the passengers disembarking looked like they had just stepped off a runway in Milan. My stepmother, Brenda, wore a white linen pantsuit that was entirely inappropriate for the weather, accessorized with an oversized sun hat and sunglasses that cost more than my first car. My father, Robert, trailed behind her like a dutiful servant, struggling with a carry-on bag made of Louis Vuitton alligator skin. And then there was Tiffany, my stepsister, walking with her phone held high, documenting her return to the kingdom she believed was hers. They didn't go home. They didn't even stop for coffee. They hailed a luxury black car and gave the driver the address of Vane Enterprises. I watched their arrival from the security feed on my laptop, hidden in the adjacent AV control room. The trap was set. The boardroom was prepped. Inside the main conference room, the air was thick with manufactured gloom. We had dimmed the lights. My grandfather, Silas, sat at the head of the massive obsidian table. He was a master actor. He slumped in his wheelchair, a blanket draped over his knees, his head lolling slightly to the side, as if the effort of sitting upright was too much. His skin looked pale, a trick of the lighting and a little theatrical powder we had applied. Next to him sat Elias Thorne. He wasn't in his usual sharp suit. He wore a slightly rumpled cardigan, looking every bit the tired, overwhelmed family lawyer trying to manage a crisis. The double doors swung open with a dramatic swoosh. "Daddy!" Brenda cried out, her voice pitching into a theatrical sob. She rushed into the room, the scent of expensive coconut tanning oil flooding the sterile space. She threw herself onto the carpet beside Silas's wheelchair, clutching his hand. "Oh, Daddy, we came as fast as we could. We were so worried." Robert shuffled in behind her, looking uncomfortable. He patted Silas's shoulder awkwardly. "You look tired. Dad, hang in there." Tiffany didn't even pretend to cry. She walked to the window, checked her reflection, and then held up her phone. I could see the screen from my monitor. She was live streaming to her close friends list. "Back at HQ," she whispered into the microphone. "Grandpa is totally out of it. Signing day. Baby, CEO era starts now." Brenda wiped a tear that didn't exist. The flight was a nightmare, but we couldn't stay away when we heard the news. We were frantic. She looked up at Elias, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Is the paperwork ready?" "Elias, we don't want to stress him out with long meetings. He needs rest." "The paperwork is extensive, Brenda," Elias said, his voice mild. "We need to be thorough." Brenda stood up, smoothing her linen pants. She looked around the room, her gaze darting to the empty corners. "Where is she?" she asked, her voice dropping the sugary act for a split second. "The addict, Monica, has she been bothering him? We heard rumors she escaped from Serenity Hills again." Silas coughed, a weak rattling sound that made Robert wince. "Monica!" Silas wheezed. I haven't seen her." "Good," Brenda snapped. "We need to increase security. If she shows up here trying to beg for money while you are in surgery, I want her arrested. She is a danger to herself and to you, Daddy." "I agree," Silas whispered. "I want to settle everything today. I want to make sure the people who truly care for me are rewarded. You have all sacrificed so much." "Oh, we have," Brenda exclaimed, sitting down in the chair to his right. "You have no idea. Daddy, Robert and I have been traveling nonstop for months, not for vacation. No, never. We have been meeting with specialists, holistic healers. We went to Switzerland to find a cure for your condition." "Switzerland?" Elias asked, looking up from his notes. "I thought you were in Hawaii." The room went deadly silent. The hum of the projector fan seemed to get louder. Brenda froze. Her eyes flicked to Robert, then back to Elias. A smile, brittle and dangerous, plastered itself onto her face. "Hawaii?" She laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound. "Oh, Elias, you know how rumors spread. We were in Zurich. It was cold. Terrible weather." "Strange," Elias said, sliding a piece of paper across the table. It was a printout of the flight manifest we had subpoenaed. Because this shows 3 first-class tickets on Hawaiian Airlines, departing Maui 5 hours ago, and the credit card statement for the Vane Trust shows a $92,000 charge at the Four Seasons Wailea. Brenda's face turned an ugly shade of blotchy red under her tan. She stood up, slamming her hand on the table. "How dare you?" she hissed. "You are spying on us? While we are out there trying to save his life?" "Save his life?" Elias repeated calmly. "By drinking Mai Tais at a poolside cabana? Is that a new medical protocol I am unaware of?" "It was a medical summit," Brenda shouted, improvising wildly. "We met with Dr. Kahananui. He is a world-renowned expert in geriatric neurology. The resort was just where the conference was held. It cost money to get access to the best minds. Elias, we did it for him." She pointed a trembling finger at Silas, who was still slumped in his chair, eyes half closed. "And the clothes?" Elias asked, gesturing to her outfit. "And the Tiffany jewelry your daughter is wearing? Was that also for the summit?" "Those are gifts," Brenda stammered. "Tokens of appreciation from the doctors. Look, this is irrelevant. My father-in-law is dying. He wants to sign the transfer. He wants us to take over so he can have peace. Stop obstructing his wishes, you senile old bat." She turned to Silas, grabbing his arm again, shaking him slightly. "Daddy, tell him to give us the papers. We need to sign the building sale before your surgery. The buyer is waiting." Silas slowly lifted his head. The act was dropping. The weakness was evaporating. He looked at Brenda, his eyes clearing, sharp and lucid. "You are right, Brenda," Silas said, his voice stronger now. No longer a wheeze, but a rumble. "I did want to sign papers. I wanted to make sure the company is in the hands of someone who understands the value of $1, someone who knows how to spot a lie." "Yes, exactly," Brenda nodded eagerly, missing the change in his tone. "That's Robert. That's me." "Someone," Silas continued, staring right at her, "who didn't spend $90,000 of my money on a vacation while my granddaughter was starving in a parking lot." Brenda recoiled as if burned. "What? Who told you that? It's a lie. Monica is a junkie. She's lying to you." "Is she?" Silas asked. He turned his chair slightly toward the AV room wall. "Why don't we ask the new auditor?" He raised his hand and snapped his fingers. "Lights," he commanded. I took a deep breath. This was it. I hit the switch on the console. The dim mood lighting vanished, replaced by the harsh, unforgiving glare of the overhead floodlights. The sudden brightness made Brenda and Tiffany squint. Then, I pressed the button for the automated door. The wall panel slid open. I stepped out from the shadows of the control room. I wasn't wearing my hoodie. I wasn't wearing my thrift store jeans. I was wearing the navy Italian suit. My hair was sharp. My heels clicked on the floor with a military cadence. I held a thick, leather-bound dossier in my left hand. I walked to the end of the table, opposite Silas. I looked at Brenda, whose jaw had literally dropped. I looked at Tiffany, who had lowered her phone, her mouth agape. I looked at my father, who turned pale as a sheet. "Hello, Brenda," I said, my voice cool and steady. "Hello, Dad." "You," Brenda whispered. "Security! Security! How did this tramp get in here?" "Sit down, Brenda," I said. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. And for the record, the title isn't tramp. It is Director of Internal Audit. I slammed the dossier onto the table. The sound echoed like a gavel. "And we have a lot to talk about." The echo of the heavy leather dossier hitting the table hung in the air like the aftermath of a gunshot. For a solid 10 seconds, nobody moved. The only sound in the cavernous boardroom was the whir of the air conditioning and the frantic, shallow breathing of my stepmother. Tiffany was the first to break the paralysis. She didn't look at me with recognition. She looked at me with the sheer, unadulterated disgust one reserves for a rat found in a kitchen cabinet. She scrambled backward, her chair screeching against the floor, and pointed a manicured finger at the security camera in the corner of the ceiling. "Security?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "Where the hell is security? Who let this junkie into the building? She's dangerous. She's probably high right now. Get her out before she steals the laptops." She turned to her mother, eyes wide with performative panic. "Mom, call the police. She's going to attack us. Look at her eyes. She's psychotic." I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I simply stood there, resting one hand on the dossier, watching her unravel. It was fascinating. They had repeated the lie about my addiction so many times that they had started to believe it themselves. It was their shield, their justification for every cruelty. "Sit down, Tiffany," Silas said. It wasn't a request. It was a command, delivered with the full weight of a man who had built this skyscraper from the ground up. "But Grandpa!" Tiffany stomped her foot, a petulant child in a grown woman's body. "She's a drug addict. She shouldn't be here. She smells like poverty." I said, "Sit down," Silas roared, his hand slamming onto the armrest of his wheelchair. The force of his voice made Tiffany jump. She collapsed back into her chair, her mouth hanging open. Brenda stared at the old man she thought was senile, her eyes darting between him and me, trying to calculate the new geometry of the room. Silas slowly turned his wheelchair to face them fully. He straightened his back, shedding the last remnants of the invalid act. "There is no need for security," Silas announced, his voice steady and cold, "because this woman is the only person in this room who actually belongs here. You asked who she is? Let me reintroduce you." He gestured to me with a sweep of his hand. "This is not Monica the addict. This is Monica Hargrave, the newly appointed Director of Internal Audit for Vane Enterprises, and as of 9 o'clock this morning, she is my court-appointed legal guardian and the sole trustee of my medical estate." The color drained from Brenda's face so fast it looked like a physical drain. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She knew what that meant. The power of attorney, the piece of paper she had used to control him, to isolate him, to rob him, was now worthless ash. "Guardian?" Robert stammered, his voice trembling. He looked at me, confusion warring with fear in his watery eyes. "But Dad, you can't be serious. She's sick. She's on meth. We have the reports. She needs help, not a job." He looked at me, pleading. "Monica, honey, tell him you need to go back to the clinic. We can help you. We just want you to get better." I looked at my father. I saw the weakness that had defined his entire life. He wasn't evil, not like Brenda. He was something worse. He was an enabler. He was a man who would watch his daughter burn just to keep his wife warm. "I am not sick, Dad," I said, my voice cutting through his babbling. "And I never was." "But the tests," he mumbled. "The doctors." "There were no tests, Robert," I said, stepping closer. "There were only bribes." I picked up the thick dossier I had slammed onto the table. "You keep talking about drugs," I said, locking eyes with him. "But the only addiction in this family is greed. And this?" I tapped the leather cover. "This isn't a treatment plan. This is a forensic audit. 500 pages. Every wire transfer, every credit card swipe, every shell company, every single dollar you stole from the man you claim to be protecting." Brenda stood up, her chair toppling over behind her. "This is preposterous. I won't listen to this. You forged this. You manipulated a senile old man to get revenge because we cut off your allowance. I am leaving." "I wouldn't do that, Mrs. Hargrave," Elias spoke up from his seat. He was smiling now, a shark-like grin. "The doors are electronically locked, and the elevators have been disabled for this floor. Unless you plan to jump from the 40th story, you are going to stay and watch the presentation." "Presentation?" Tiffany whispered. I pulled a small remote control from my pocket. "You like stories, don't you, Tiffany?" I asked, turning to her. "You like creating narratives for your followers. You love showing the world how perfect your life is. Well, let's look at your latest masterpiece." I pointed the remote at the ceiling and pressed the button. The motorized screen descended behind Silas. The projector hummed to life, casting a beam of pure white light that cut through the tension in the room. And there it was. Projected 20 feet wide in high definition was the photo. The sunset in Maui, the turquoise cocktails, the smiles that dripped with self-satisfaction, and the caption, blown up so large that every cruel pixel was visible. Wish you were like us, capable of enjoying life and being successful. Stop bothering us. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Tiffany let out a small squeak and covered her mouth with her hands. Brenda stared at the screen, her eyes widening as she realized the context. She realized that while she was posting this, I was freezing, and she realized that the man in the background, the blurry figure she hadn't noticed, was Elias. I walked over to the screen, the light washing over me. I stood right next to the image of their smiling faces. "You sent this to me 3 nights ago," I said softly. "I was sleeping in a van in a Walmart parking lot. It was 20 degrees outside. I had $12 to my name. You were drinking a $30 cocktail paid for by the Medical Emergency Fund." I turned to face them. My expression wasn't angry anymore. It was icy. "You told me to stop bothering you," I continued. "You told me you wished I was like you." I paused, letting the words hang there. "Well, congratulations, Brenda. Congratulations. Tiffany, your wish came true." I gestured to my suit, to the boardroom, to the terrified faces of the board members who had just walked into the observation deck above us. "I am successful now. I am the director of the department that is about to dismantle your lives." I leaned forward, placing my hands on the table, leaning into Brenda's personal space until I could smell the fear radiating off her. "But I am not like you," I whispered. "Because I earned my seat at this table. You stole yours, and the only thing you are going to wish for when I am done with you is that you had never pressed send on that photo." Brenda slumped back against the wall, her legs giving out. Robert put his head in his hands. Tiffany looked at her phone, which was still live streaming, and realized with horror that 5,000 people had just watched her empire crumble in real time. "Now," I said, straightening up and opening the dossier to page 1. "Let's talk about the Serenity Hills Shell Corporation. Who wants to go first? Or shall I let the bank records speak for themselves?" I opened the dossier. The sound of the stiff leather cover bending back was the only noise in the room. I didn't look at them. I looked at the data. To an auditor, data does not lie. It does not manipulate. It does not post filtered photos on Instagram. It simply exists as cold, hard proof of reality. "Exhibit A," I announced, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room where the board members were watching behind the glass. I pressed the remote, and a new document appeared on the screen. It was a corporate registration filing from the state of Nevada. "Serenity Hills Rehabilitation Center," I read. "According to the invoices you submitted to the trust, this is a state-of-the-art facility providing 24-hour care for severe addicts. You billed the estate $15,000 a month for 18 months. That is a total of $270,000. I clicked the remote. The screen changed to a Google Street View image. It showed a dusty, sun-bleached strip mall in Las Vegas. Sandwiched between a vape shop and a payday loan center, a single mailbox with the number 402 was highlighted. "This is Serenity Hills," I said. "It is a rented mailbox. It has no doctors. It has no beds. It has no horses for equine therapy. What it does have, however, is a sole proprietor." I clicked again. A copy of a driver's license appeared. "Marcus Vance," I said. "Brenda, perhaps you can explain to the board why your younger brother, a man whose last known employment was as a warm-up DJ for a bankrupt nightclub, is receiving checks for my medical care?" Brenda was shaking. Her hands were gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. It was a consulting fee," she stammered, sweat beading on her forehead. "Marcus connects families with underground specialists. It is a referral service." "A referral service," I repeated flatly. "Interesting, because I traced the outgoing wire transfers from the Serenity Hills account. The money didn't go to doctors. It went to a Porsche dealership in Henderson. It went to a casino marker at the Bellagio, and 40% of it was wired right back into a private account under the name Tiffany Hargrave Image Consulting." Tiffany gasped, clutching her chest. "That's a lie. That's business expense. I was doing PR for the clinic. You were laundering money, I corrected her, and not very well. You used the same IP address for your banking login as you did for your Instagram uploads. I turned the page of the dossier. Exhibit B, the Vain Charity Fund. This was the one that hurt the most. My grandfather had set up that fund to help orphans and veterans. It was sacred. On January 28th, I said, pointing to the screen where a bank statement was now displayed, a withdrawal of $92,450 was made. The memo line reads, Emergency grant for victim of domestic trauma. I looked at my father. Dad, did you feel traumatized while you were ordering the Wagyu beef tasting menu at Spago? Because that is where $5,000 of this grant went on the first night. We needed to eat, Robert whispered, his face gray. You ate the money meant for starving children, Silas said from the head of the table. His voice was low, rumbling like an approaching earthquake. You took the fund I built to honor my mother, and you turned it into a buffet. Exhibit C, I continued, relentless. The classification of personal luxury goods as medical necessities. This was the part that was purely insulting to anyone with a brain. I clicked the remote rapidly, flashing receipts onto the screen one after another. Here is a receipt from the Hermes Boutique in Waikiki. Item: 1 Birkin 25 in Togo leather. Price: $28,000. Expense code submitted to the trust. Orthopedic spine support device. I looked at Brenda's handbag sitting on the floor. I didn't know Hermes made medical equipment. Brenda, does it come with a prescription? Here's a receipt for a Rolex Submariner. Gold and steel. Price: $16,000. Expense code: cardiac rhythm monitor. I looked at my father's wrist. He instinctively covered his watch with his other hand, a gesture of guilt so transparent it was pathetic. And here, I said, pausing for effect, is a receipt for a private yacht charter, $5,000 for a sunset cruise. Expense code: aquatic physical therapy. Enough, Brenda screamed. She stood up, her face twisted into a mask of pure ugliness. So we spent some money. We deserved it. We have been taking care of this old man for 5 years. We wiped his drool. We wheeled him around. We sacrificed our lives for him. We are entitled to compensation. You didn't take care of him, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You imprisoned him. You drugged him with unnecessary sedatives to keep him docile. And you planned something much worse. You have no proof of that, Brenda sneered, regaining some of her confidence. You have receipts? Fine. We will pay it back. It's a civil matter. You can't prove intent. Actually, I said, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. I plugged it into the laptop. You thought you were smart. Brenda, I said. You disabled the security cameras in the hallway. You fired the old staff. But you forgot one thing. Grandfather was paranoid about security in the 70s. He installed an analog backup system in the library fireplace. It runs on a separate circuit. It records audio, and it never stops. I pressed the spacebar. Static filled the room for a second. Then, voices cut through clearly. Voice 1, Brenda. How much longer? Robert? The doctor said his heart is operating at 30%. Voice 2, Robert. I don't know. Honey, he's tough. The old bastard just won't let go. Voice 1, Brenda. Well, he needs to let go before the audit next quarter. If he's still alive in March, the trustees might ask questions about the real estate sale. We need to accelerate things. Voice 2, Robert. What do you mean? Voice 1, Brenda. I mean, maybe the nurse forgets his beta blockers for a few days. Maybe he has another episode, and once he's gone, we deal with the girl. Voice 2, Robert. Monica? Voice 1, Brenda. We plant the drugs in her van, a lot of them. Enough to get her 10 to 20 years. With her record, no one will believe her. She goes to prison. He goes to the ground, and we go to Paris. The recording ended. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a grave. Robert was staring at the table, tears streaming down his face. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. But Tiffany, ever the survivor, jumped up. "This is fake. This is AI. You generated this. Anyone can make a voice clone now. You can't use this. It's not admissible. It's a deepfake." She looked desperately at the board members behind the glass. "She's framing us. She used a computer to make my parents sound like monsters." "It is not a deepfake, young lady." Elias Thorne stood up. He didn't look like a tired family lawyer anymore. He stood with the posture of the federal judge he had been for 30 years. He projected an aura of absolute, unshakable law. "I personally retrieved the physical tape from the analog reel this morning," Elias said, his voice booming. "I have established the chain of custody. I have had it authenticated by the FBI's forensic audio lab. Calling in a favor from my days on the bench, that is your mother's voice, that is your father's voice, and that is a conspiracy to commit murder." He looked at Brenda, who was now trembling so violently she had to lean against the wall to stay upright. "Furthermore," Elias continued, checking his watch, "based on the evidence presented here and the authenticated audio of a threat to life, I petitioned the court for an emergency injunction at 8 o'clock this morning." He looked at the three of them with cold satisfaction. "The order was signed 15 minutes ago. It is a total asset freeze under the RICO Act, Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations." As if on cue, a sound rippled through the room. 3 phones, sitting on the polished obsidian table, lit up simultaneously. Tiffany grabbed hers first. Her face went pale. Apple Pay suspended? Brenda looked at her phone. A notification from Chase Private Client. "Alert. Account ending in 4409 has been frozen by court order. Contact legal department immediately." Robert checked his alert. "American Express Centurion card has been canceled." "It's gone," Elias said, sitting back down and folding his hands. "All of it. The trust accounts, the personal accounts, the offshore accounts in the Caymans you thought we didn't know about. Even your Venmo, Tiffany. You can't buy a pack of gum right now." "You broke us," Brenda whispered, sliding down the wall until she hit the floor. "You took everything." "No, Brenda," I said, closing the dossier. "I just balanced the books." The realization that her life was over didn't make Brenda humble. It made her feral. The notification on her phone was the final straw, snapping the last thread of sanity she had been clinging to. She let out a guttural scream, a sound that was less human and more like a wounded animal, and launched herself across the obsidian table. Her target was my throat. "You witch!" she shrieked, her manicured claws raking the air inches from my face. "I will kill you! I will kill you!" I didn't flinch. I didn't even step back. I knew something she didn't. 2 large men in dark suits, who had been standing silently by the rear wall masquerading as junior associates, moved with the speed of coiled vipers. Before Brenda could make contact, they intercepted her. One grabbed her wrists, twisting them behind her back with practiced efficiency, while the other secured her shoulder, forcing her down onto the table she had just been presiding over. Her face was pressed against the cold stone, her expensive sun hat knocked askew, her breath fogging the polished surface. "Get off me!" she screamed, kicking her legs. "Do you know who I am? I am Mrs. Silas Vane. I own this building." No, you don't," Silas said. His voice cut through her hysteria like a blade. "You don't own the building. You don't own the chair you are sitting on. And as of 5 minutes ago, you don't even own the name Mrs. Vane. I have already instructed Elias to file for an annulment based on fraud." Brenda stopped struggling, her eyes wide with terror as she looked up at the man she had tormented. "Silas, please," she whimpered, pivoting instantly from aggression to manipulation. "I was stressed. I didn't mean it. We can talk about this. We are family." "We are not family," Silas said, looking at her with a detachment that was far scarier than anger. "And we are not going to talk. I am done talking. I told you I was going to settle the estate today. I meant it." He looked at Elias. "Execute the next phase." Elias nodded and pressed a button on the intercom. "Send them in." The double doors at the far end of the boardroom burst open, but it wasn't catering staff or executives who walked in. It was 6 officers in tactical vests, followed by 2 detectives in plain clothes. The gold badges on their chests caught the light. Economic Crimes Unit. The atmosphere in the room shifted from a corporate dispute to a crime scene. Brenda Hargrave, Robert Hargrave, Tiffany Hargrave, the lead detective announced, his voice flat and bored. I have warrants for your arrest. Arrest? Robert squeaked. He looked around the room as if searching for an exit that didn't exist. For what? We didn't kill anyone. Not for lack of trying, Elias muttered. The detective stepped forward, unfolding a piece of paper. You are being charged with conspiracy to commit grand larceny, wire fraud in excess of $5 million, identity theft, forgery of medical documents, and aggravated elder abuse. He looked at Brenda, who was being hauled up by the security guards to be handed over to the police. And, Mrs. Hargrave, we have an additional charge for you. Attempted solicitation of murder, based on the audio evidence provided to the district attorney this morning. The click of the handcuffs ratcheting tight around Brenda's wrists was the loudest sound in the world. That sound seemed to break my father. Robert, the man who had once been my hero, the man who had taught me how to ride a bike, crumbled. He didn't stand tall. He didn't try to protect his wife or his stepdaughter. He collapsed to his knees right there on the plush carpet. He crawled toward me, actually crawled. Monica, he sobbed, reaching out to grab the hem of my pants leg. I stepped back, keeping myself out of his reach. Monica, please, you have to stop this. You know me. I'm your dad. I didn't want to do it. She made me. It was all Brenda. He pointed a shaking finger at his wife, who was currently being read her Miranda rights. She controlled everything. She made me sign the papers. I wanted to call you, I swear. I wanted to tell you the truth, but she threatened to leave me. I was a victim too. Monica. I looked down at him. I searched my heart for anger, for hate, for the burning desire for revenge that had kept me warm in my van during those freezing nights. But I couldn't find it. The fire had burned out, leaving only a cold gray ash of pity. He was pathetic, a weak man who had sold his own flesh and blood for a quiet life in a leased Mercedes. Stand up, Robert, I said. I didn't call him Dad. Monica, please, tell them I'm innocent, he begged, not running down his nose. I just did what I was told. That is exactly the problem, I said, my voice trembling slightly despite my best efforts. You watched them destroy my life. You watched them drug your father. You sat at a dinner table in Hawaii eating lobster while you knew I was eating out of a dumpster. You didn't light the match, Robert, but you stood by and warmed your hands on the fire. I looked him in the eye, my gaze hard and dry. You chose a side, and you chose wrong. Your silence wasn't fear. It was an accomplice. It was a crime. I nodded to the officer behind him. Take him. Robert screamed as they hauled him up and cuffed his hands behind his back. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Meanwhile, across the room, a different tragedy was unfolding. Tiffany wasn't begging for forgiveness. She was begging for her phone. An officer had confiscated it and was placing it into an evidence bag. No, you can't take that, she wailed, tears streaming down her face, ruining her contour. That's my career. I have brand deals. I have to post today or I'll breach my contract. Give it back. She turned to me, her eyes wild. Monica, tell them. I'm an influencer. My entire life is there. If I go offline for 2 days, the algorithm will kill me. I'll lose everything. You're worried about the algorithm? I asked, almost laughing at the absurdity. Tiffany, you are facing 10 years in a federal penitentiary. But my followers, she cried. They'll think I'm a loser. Delete it. Monica, please, if you have any mercy, delete my account. Don't let them see this. I walked over to the evidence bag. I looked at the phone, seeing the notifications still popping up. Likes, comments, the shallow validation she lived for. Don't worry, I said softly. leaning in close so only she could hear. "I won't let them delete it, and I won't delete it either." Her face lit up with a flicker of hope. "You won't?" "No," I smile, and it was a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I'm gonna leave it up. Every single photo, every single video of you bragging about money you stole. It is the perfect evidence. Tiffany, the jury is going to love scrolling through your feed. I'm going to make sure your Instagram account is the star witness at your trial. It will be a permanent digital monument to your greed." She stared at me, her mouth opening in a silent scream of horror as the reality hit her. Her vanity was going to be her cage. "Let's go," the lead detective barked. They lined them up, Brenda, disheveled and hateful, Robert, weeping and broken, Tiffany, catatonic with shock. "Walk," the officer ordered. They were led out of the boardroom, not through the back exit, but through the main glass doors. The entire office floor, hundreds of employees, analysts, secretaries, and managers had stopped working. They were pressed against the glass walls of the corridor, watching in stunned silence. I walked to the glass wall of the boardroom and watched them go. It was the longest walk of their lives. Every step was documented by the eyes of the people they had looked down on, the secretaries they had yelled at, the interns they had ignored. Everyone saw the handcuffs. Everyone saw the fall. As they reached the elevators, the very elevators they had ridden up in thinking they were kings and queens, Brenda looked back one last time. Her eyes met mine through the glass. There was no defiance left, just the hollow, terrifying realization that the lowly secretary she had mocked now held the keys to her cell. The elevator doors slid shut, cutting off the sight of them forever. The office remained silent for a heartbeat longer. Then, slowly, the murmurs began. The spell was broken. I turned back to the room. Silas was sitting in his wheelchair, looking at the empty doorway. He looked tired, but for the first time in years, he looked free. "Is it done?" he asked quietly. "It's done," I said. "Good." Silas exhaled, closing his eyes. "Now, help me get out of this damn chair. I want to stand on my own 2 feet." The silence that followed the closing of the elevator doors was heavy, not with tension, but with the suffocating weight of a tragedy finally acknowledged. The adrenaline that had sustained my grandfather through the confrontation evaporated in an instant. The man who had roared like a lion moments ago suddenly gasped, his hand clutching at his chest, his face turning an alarming shade of gray. "Grandpa!" I cried out, dropping the dossier and rushing to his side. Silas didn't answer. He slumped forward in his wheelchair, his breathing ragged and shallow. Elias was there in a second, his legal composure replaced by the frantic urgency of a friend. He loosened Silas's tie and checked his pulse. "It is his heart," Elias said, his voice tight. "Get the water, now." I scrambled for the pitcher on the table, my hands shaking as I poured a glass. We tilted his head back, helping him sip the water, waiting for the color to return to his cheeks. For 5 terrifying minutes, the only sound in the room was the hum of the projector fans still displaying that damnable photo of Hawaii. Slowly, the rhythm of his breathing stabilized. Silas opened his eyes. They were wet. The great Silas Vane, the iron tycoon of Seattle, was crying. It wasn't a physical pain that had floored him. It was the crushing heartbreak of a patriarch realizing his entire family was a lie. "I am sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking. He reached out and took my hand, his grip weak. "Monica, look at me. I am so sorry. I let them poison me against you. I sat in this chair and let them tell me you were a thief while they picked my pockets. I failed you, child. I failed your mother." I looked at him, seeing the guilt etched into every line of his face. I wanted to tell him it was okay. I wanted to offer the easy forgiveness that people expect in movies. But I was an auditor, and I dealt with the truth. "You did fail me," I said softly, squeezing his hand back. "You believed the lie because it was easier than facing the truth that your son was weak and his wife was a predator. You left me out in the cold, Grandpa." Silas flinched, closing his eyes as if I had struck him. But, I continued, brushing a stray lock of silver hair from his forehead, you are here now. You stood up for me when it mattered. We cannot get back the last 5 years. That time is gone, burned up like that money in Hawaii. But we are not dead yet. We can sit here in the ashes and mourn, or we can start building something new. Silas looked at me, a flicker of his old strength returning. From the ashes, he repeated. Yes, we build. The next few months were a blur of legal proceedings and liquidation. I didn't move into the Vane estate. The mansion felt too big, too full of ghosts and the lingering scent of Brenda's perfume. Instead, I rented a modest one-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill. I needed to know that the roof over my head was paid for by my own paycheck, not an inheritance. I needed to keep my feet on the ground. My job as the director of internal audit wasn't just a title. I spent 12 hours a day dissecting the financial rot Brenda had left behind. But the most satisfying work happened on a rainy Saturday in March. I organized a public auction. The warehouse was packed. Wealthy socialites and bargain hunters milled around, eyeing the spoils of war. I stood in the back, watching as the auctioneer lifted a gavel. Lot 42, he announced. A Hermes Birkin bag, Togo leather, barely used. It was the bag Brenda had bought with the medical device money. Sold for $22,000. I watched the woman walk away with the bag. She had no idea of the history it carried. Every dollar raised that day, from Brenda's bags, from Robert's watch, from the Porsche Tiffany had bought with laundered money, went into a new account. I didn't keep a cent. I donated every single penny to the Seattle Coalition for the Homeless. The money that had been stolen to pretend I was an addict was now paying for beds and hot meals for people who were actually living the nightmare I had escaped. Then came the sentencing. I sat in the front row, wearing the same navy suit I had worn in the boardroom. Elias sat next to me. Brenda refused to look at the gallery. She stared straight ahead, her face gaunt, her hair graying at the roots. The judge, a woman with zero tolerance for elder abuse, threw the book at her. Brenda Hargrave, the judge read, for the crimes of grand larceny, fraud, and conspiracy, you are sentenced to 15 years in a federal correctional institution. No possibility of parole for 12 years. Brenda didn't scream this time. She just slumped, defeated. My father, Robert, got 8 years. When the bailiff led him away, he looked back at me. He mouthed the word sorry. I didn't look away. But I didn't smile either. I just nodded. It was a closing of a chapter, not a reconciliation. But the most poetic justice was reserved for Tiffany, because she was younger and had cooperated in the final days by giving up her mother's passwords. She avoided prison time. Instead, she received 5 years of probation and 2,000 hours of community service. The judge, perhaps sensing the specific nature of Tiffany's vanity, assigned her to the sanitation department. 6 months later, I stood on the podium of the New Horizon Charity Gala. The ballroom was filled with the city's elite. I adjusted the microphone, looking out at the sea of faces. In the front row, sitting at the VIP table, was Silas Vane. He looked healthier than he had in years. He was smiling. Next to him, Elias raised a glass of sparkling water to me. Good evening, I said, my voice steady. My name is Monica Hargrave. I pressed the clicker in my hand. Behind me, on the massive screen, a photo appeared. It wasn't a graph or a chart. It was the photo, the sunset, the cocktails, the family in Hawaii. A murmur went through the crowd. This photo, I began, was sent to me when I had $12 in my pocket. It was meant to break me. It was meant to tell me that I was worthless because I wasn't successful like the people in the frame. I looked at the image, then back at the audience. But success isn't what you wear, or where you vacation. Success is the truth. This photo is a lie that cost $90,000. It is a monument to financial fraud and the abuse of trust. I keep it here not to remind me of my pain, but to remind me of my purpose. Today, the Vane Foundation is launching a new initiative to protect the elderly from financial predation. We are going to make sure that no one else has to sleep in a van because their family decided to cash in their legacy. The applause was thunderous. It washed over me, warm and genuine. I looked at my grandfather, and he nodded. He was proud, not because I was rich, but because I was real. As I walked off the stage, my phone buzzed in my clutch. I hesitated. I almost didn't check it, but curiosity is a hard habit to break. I opened the message. It was from an unknown number. "You won. I get it. I am currently scrubbing graffiti off a urinal in a public park in downtown. A homeless guy just threw up on my boots. Happy now?" I stared at the screen. I thought about the girl who used to post photos of her manicures every day. I thought about the healing vibes caption. I didn't reply. I didn't feel a rush of glee. I just felt a quiet, solid sense of balance. The universe had corrected itself. I turned off my phone. I walked out the back door of the hotel, stepping into the cool Seattle night. The rain had stopped. The air smelled of wet pavement and pine trees, the smell of the city I loved. I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't the heiress. I wasn't even the auditor. I was just Monica. And for the first time in a very long time, the path ahead of me wasn't blocked by a gate I couldn't open. It was wide, and it was mine. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from right now. So please drop a comment below with your city or country. Let's see how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed this tale of justice served, please make sure to subscribe to the Family Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this video get recommended to more people who need to see the truth win. See you in the next story.